Let's talk a little bit about cannabis from a more personal perspective, because for me, one of the things that I've talked about is how um, I when I discovered cannabis was an eye-opening experience because I always felt like my mind has always been really busy. It's hard for me to turn off all the different like electricity that's going on in my brain, and for the first time in my life, like trying cannabis allowed me to sort of like silence things and allowed me to tune in. Like if I'm playing Super Smash Brothers, like I'm zoned in. If I'm writing something, I'm zoned in.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it reminds me of my brother. My brother, um, he grew up smoking cannabis a lot growing up, and this is before I was into it, and I was like, "Ooh, that's bad for you." And he would say like, he would swear by it. Um, and I think it's just interesting that everyone has sort of different reactions to it, and they use cannabis in different ways to do different things.
Yes.
For you personally, how has cannabis been used to shape and enhance your life? Like, do you use it to do certain things, or when you're feeling a certain way? Like, where does it factor into your life?
Yeah, for me, cannabis is it for me it opens up my creativity, you know. I studied sociology in school,
Hmm.
and I always joke around with my friends because my professors would always write me like personal emails. I had one professor wrote me a personal email just thanking me for the material that I brought to class, and my explanation for it is cannabis. All right. I would indulge in cannabis before writing my papers, while doing my research, while creating my clothing. And it for me, it just opens up my creativity. Something like you, like my mind is always going at 1,000. I'm always thinking about a million things at one time. And when I use cannabis, it really helps me to like just focus, and the ideas that I come up with are just they're really good sometimes. Sometimes they're a little crazy, but most of the time.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Sometimes it's like, sometimes it's like you have to know that limit where like there's the sweet spot where it's like, okay, I'm getting good ideas, and then other times where it's like, whoa, the ideas are too
Like,
good. Like I need to reel them in a little bit more.
yeah, you're like, let me table this right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
definitely.
so for you, you know, one of the another topics within cannabis that I think is really interesting, because it tends to be very personalized, is how do you prefer to consume your cannabis? I know that some people swear by edibles, some people swear by wax. For me, I am like if I'm in my own element, I prefer like a glass bong. I prefer to be like iced, so it's nice and cool.
Yeah,
And you kind of just like let it hang out there.
yeah.
How about you? What is your method? I know that you've tagged a couple of your posts with cannabis gear. Like, what is your gear like? What is your setup like?
Yeah. My thing is flowers.
Hmm.
I'm big on flowers. Here in New York City, we have we have these events, right, with a lot of different vendors. So they're bringing a lot of products. A lot of those products from out of state. We're starting to see them now, and I'm still mainly the flowers, but there is this one girl. I'm sorry I don't have her name because I would have loved to mention her, but she makes these little miniature sweet potato pies, and they're
Ooh,
infused. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I could get her name and put it in the comments, right?
awesome. Yeah, 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 definitely.
Because yeah, these things are amazing. When I tell you they're amazing, she makes
Strong.
that. Oh my God. And it's like when you taste it, there's like a light, it has a light flavor of the
Hmm.
cannabis in it, but you feel like you're at Thanksgiving at somebody's house.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I think edibles are probably one of my favorite ways to take cannabis
Yeah.
because it's funny because especially if it's a good edible, because some edibles like it tastes really danky, and you're just like
Yeah, yeah.
it's a little too funky.
A little too
But
potent.
when you have like a really good recipe, and especially like a really good edible, where it's like it's almost like you're just on this really slow roller coaster and you just feel it like creeping up in your head and you're like, whoa, okay,
Yeah,
here we go.
yeah.
Like here we go. And it's just like this weird ceiling where it just keeps going. But yeah, for me, I would say flour in a glass or edibles for me.
Flower. Yeah, yeah. And myself too, I mentioned earlier about informing people,
Hmm.
I'm on a learning curve as well. I'm learning a lot of different things. I went to a seminar a couple of weeks ago in the city, and there was some people there. They were talking about cannabis more from the medical aspect of it. And
Hmm.
one of the guys mentioned how in the morning he does CBD and cannabis, like that's how he starts his day off. And then
Hmm.
throughout the
Hmm.
day, yeah, throughout the day he does THC, and then later on in the day he does CBD and THC again. So, I'm learning as well. And I'm happy to try all the different combinations that there are out there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I always tell people, like you really have to actually like experiment with it because everybody is different. Like my wife is different, and like we could smoke the same exact thing, and I'm really chatty and I want to talk, and then she's very like quiet and reserved, and like sometimes it's just based off of different strains and whatnot. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's like it is a learning process, and I think a lot of
yes.
people. It's funny how you sometimes you'll meet these people who have tried cannabis and they're like, oh well, I tried it once and it was not for me, but it's like you have to get into it. So this is sort of leads into my next question. So um, one, can you remember the first time you tried cannabis? And two, can you remember the first time you tried it and you were like, whoa, okay, there's something in here? Because for me, that's how it was like. Like the first time I tried cannabis, I had kind of an experience where like I was driving and I was like, ooh, it feels kind of spacey. But I tried it like 3 months later and I smoked something and then I was watching like on my phone and I had my phone up and I was laying down and then I was so baked that I thought my screen was like a big screen TV, and so I was just tripping out, but I was like, oh my God, like what is going on here? So for you, like, can you remember a time where you were like, okay, this is like, there's something to this, like, I like the way that this feels. And then can you remember the very first time that you had that experience, or if they were the same?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It reminds me of something really funny when I was younger. So, like I told you before, my family, is into cannabis. But when I was younger, I had an idea. I'm talking like elementary school. I had an idea that my mom was using cannabis, right? And one day I found her rolling papers, right? And I told her, I was like, hey, these rolling papers are for marijuana. She's like, no, those are not for marijuana. Those are for my hair rollers. Right. And then and then growing up, I remember when I was in junior high school, my friends and I, we would cut school and we would roll um, anything we could find. Tea bags, oregano. I know somebody on the line has to have done this when they were younger, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, my first time using cannabis was I was about 14 years old, um,
Hmm.
here in the city, and I remember just hanging out in a park with some friends and just realizing how amazing it was. I remember at first it was like this anxiety creeping up, right?
Hmm.
That's the way I felt it. I felt like this, like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? But then
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
just turned into a calm, and I've always been into music. I remember listening to music and I remember hearing stuff in the music that I had never
Yeah.
heard of
Oh
before.
yeah, yeah, yeah. 100%. Like you listen to a song that you've heard maybe 50 times and you're like, "Whoa, dude, that vocal backing, that was not there before." And it's weird like you can hear and I keep telling people like you know, listening to music and being stoned like you feel the music more and it
Yes,
really gets
yes.
to you more. But sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no. So I just remember that. And then I remember another great experience I had. I went to college in Savannah, Georgia, and my
Hmm.
school my school sat on a marsh. They had a marine biology program, and one day some friends of mine, we were smoking marijuana, and we decided that we were going to take the boat that they had that the school used to collect specimens. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
this is one of those. This is one of those crazy marijuana stories. And we all jumped into this boat. It was a push start button boat, and we're out in the marsh. We're about we're about 15 minutes away from the school, and then the boat cuts off.
Oh
Yeah,
shit.
the boat cut off while we were out there. We had to get the school had to get the authorities and everything to come and get us.
Oh,
Yeah.
damn.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't get in too much trouble though. We didn't get into too much trouble.
Damn. Well,
But yeah.
you lucked out with that one.
Definitely.